You've found just stories, simple, heartfelt moments from real lives, stories that remind us how connected we all are through love, loss, and hope. Get cozy. The stories are about to begin. Olivia hurried down the endless white corridor of the clinic. Urgent paperwork awaited completion. Her schedule today included two complex surgeries, one involving a young patient whose family was connected to her own past by a multitude of threads. She wished she could forget that tangle of pain, injustice, fear, and old grievances. It seemed it was all behind her. A new life had opened its doors, and nothing reminded her of the anxious time of her youth anymore. However, just recently, the past had reminded her of itself again, appearing right at the threshold of her office. But now everything was different. The very people from the past stood before her. It was as if Olivia had been doused with ice water. She recognized them instantly, although years had passed since the very young girl, with a light backpack on her shoulders, had essentially fled her childhood home. Time had changed them both, but it was impossible not to recognize them. The conversation was long and agonizing. They didn't try to blame her for anything, though it seemed there was plenty of reason to. It was simply that a great misfortune had befallen them. After this, don't believe in the boomerangs of fate. As often happens, the cursed boomerang struck someone completely innocent, a tiny little person, and it was this little person who needed help. Olivia, a doctor with many years of practice, had encountered similar cases. She knew how to act. That night after the meeting, sleep wouldn't come to Olivia. Her children had long been dreaming sweet dreams in their rooms. Her beloved husband breathed deeply and evenly beside her. Olivia tossed and turned, trying to shake off the memories, but images from the past, unbidden, rose before her eyes like frames from an old film. Olivia didn't remember her own mother. She knew she had a mother, but she was only 4 years old when she lost the person closest to her. She only learned about her parent from her father, who, however, didn't particularly like dwelling on memories of his first wife, partly because it caused him pain. As she grew up, Olivia noticed the sadness in his eyes whenever her mother was mentioned. And then Susan appeared in the house when Olivia was 7. She immediately took the place of the full mistress. The stepmother couldn't stand any mention of her predecessor, and her father preferred to remain silent so as not to upset his current wife. There was another kindred spirit, her mother's cousin, Aunt Ellen. She lived in another city. Since childhood, Olivia spent 1 or 2 weeks a year with her during holidays. And before, while Ellen hadn't moved away yet, niece and aunt saw each other much more often. This was a time filled with light and joy. Aunt Ellen took the girl to theaters and museums. They walked, chatted incessantly, and laughed. Aunt Ellen's son, Andrew, already a high schooler then, helped his younger cousin with math and carried her on his strong shoulders, and sometimes took her with him on walks with his friends. All his friends, especially the girls, treated Olivia with sincere warmth. It was wonderful. But Susan couldn't stand Aunt Ellen. Even little Olivia could feel it. The stepmother spoke ill of her, with obvious disdain. Aunt Ellen was not welcome in their house, and this upset and surprised the girl. How could anyone not love Aunt Ellen? She was so kind, cheerful, and wonderful. Aunt Ellen often told Olivia about her mother, mostly funny and touching stories from their shared childhood and youth. The cousins were inseparable. They had gone through so much together. Good times, difficult times, funny times, and even dangerous ones. Aunt Ellen sincerely admired Clara, and Olivia simply adored listening to these stories and looking at the photographs that preserved the memory of the person closest to her, whom she didn't remember at all. "Oh, how happy your mother was when you were born," Aunt Ellen smiled, looking at Olivia. "She was just flying. We made plans together on how we would raise you, develop you, educate you. You had such tiny fingers, as if made for something skillful. Your mother dreamed that you would become a surgeon, that you would save people. She had a heart condition since childhood, a complex defect, and no one could cure her. So she wanted her daughter to help people like her, to make them healthy and happy." By the way, it didn't escape Olivia's notice that Aunt Ellen herself had a very negative attitude towards Susan, and towards her father, too. No, the aunt didn't say anything directly. The girl noticed it by the change in Ellen's voice tone, by the expression in her eyes. Olivia was worried. Why couldn't the adults who meant so much to her tolerate each other, barely restraining themselves when they met so as not to say nasty things? Susan constantly found reasons for dissatisfaction. Either Aunt Ellen brought Olivia home too late, or she didn't dress her properly for a walk, or not all the homework was done. The nitpicking was endless. Imperceptibly, it happened that Olivia visited Aunt Ellen less and less often, and then some scandal erupted between the adults, and communication with Ellen ceased altogether. Aunt Ellen called only once after that quarrel. Susan graciously allowed them to talk. "Little one, don't think I'm abandoning you," Aunt Ellen said. "It's just how circumstances are. You can't understand yet. You're small. You know my address. If something happens, be sure to come. I'll help you in a difficult moment. Remember this, you can always count on me." And that was it. That was their last conversation. After that, it was as if it was cut off. Susan said that Aunt Ellen had her own affairs, that her son was applying to university, she had problems with work, she didn't have time for her niece. But Olivia understood everything. She heard Aunt Ellen call the home phone, but Susan answered and spoke to her rudely, not calling Olivia. One day Olivia saw Aunt Ellen from the car window. She was standing in their yard. She waved to her, but Susan distracted her, and the car sped away, leaving Aunt Ellen behind. Apparently, she was trying to meet her niece, and it wasn't easy, as she lived in another city and had to leave her affairs and travel. But her father and stepmother did everything to prevent Olivia from seeing Aunt Ellen. They were both united in their dislike. It was hard for Olivia at first without contact with her beloved Aunt Ellen, the only one who supported and understood her. At home, the atmosphere was far from cheerful. Her father and stepmother had a daughter, Vicky. At first, Olivia was even happy. A charming baby, a sister, a little doll. But the joy didn't last long. Firstly, Olivia suddenly saw how tender and loving parents could be towards a certain child. Her father worked a lot and couldn't give her as much attention as she would have liked. He sometimes asked about school, about how she was feeling, but it was clear that the answers didn't particularly interest him. And when Olivia asked him to play with her, to give her a piggyback ride like Andrew, Aunt Ellen's son, to walk in the park or even play soccer, he brushed her off, and his gaze was distant, as if, while talking to his daughter, he was somewhere far away. Susan, on the other hand, simply irritated Olivia. The girl tried to behave impeccably to earn her favor. She did her homework, cleaned up after herself, played quietly and unobtrusively. But Susan always found something to scold her stepdaughter for. Either this wasn't right or that wasn't right. And again, that look from Susan, the look at an annoying hindrance. It was impossible not to notice. And yet, the girl had been so drawn to her at first. She wanted what others had: shopping trips with her stepmother, heart-to-heart talks, cooking together. But Susan avoided such interactions in every way. However, she performed her parental duties diligently. No one from the outside could accuse Susan of poor care for the girl. And then Vicky was born, and Olivia saw her father and Susan from a completely different perspective, realizing that they could be like that, loving, caring, attentive. Only not with her, but with Vicky. Vicky's smile, her cooing, her first hesitant steps, all this filled the baby's parents with delight. They could spend hours admiring their daughter playing in her playpen or simply sleeping. They stood over the crib so happy, exchanging glances. They even threw lavish birthday parties for Vicky with their last money, buying her the best of everything. Olivia got whatever was left over. The slightest successes of her younger sister were elevated to the rank of genius, while Olivia, no matter how hard she tried, couldn't earn even modest praise. She studied brilliantly. She was a straight-A student, but this was taken for granted. It was the contrast that hurt. No, Olivia didn't envy her sister's dolls and outfits. After all, she was dressed herself. The point was different. Her parents always listened to Vicky with genuine interest. They enjoyed spending time with her. They were genuinely happy with her responses. And Olivia felt like an outsider, completely foreign in this family. Her father still sometimes tried to talk to his older daughter, supposedly heart to heart. It was clear that he was making an effort, and in reality, he wasn't particularly interested in hearing about her life. Susan didn't even hide her irritation, and over the years, her dislike became almost obvious. Later, Olivia guessed that it was Susan who turned her father against her, told him only bad things, and portrayed her stepdaughter in a negative light. She did it skillfully, masterfully. Her husband didn't even suspect his wife's intentions, especially since he was almost never home. He worked a lot. He was even grateful to his new wife for helping him, raising his child, nurturing her. Her father worked away for months at a time, and Olivia lived only with Susan and Vicky, feeling like a stranger in her own apartment. Gradually, Olivia acquired many responsibilities. She had to clean the rooms before Susan came home from work, go grocery shopping, cook dinner, take Vicky to clubs and classes. 90% of the time, Vicky was too young to get to her activities on her own, and Olivia accompanied her, in addition to having many household chores, not to mention homework. In high school, there was a lot of homework. Olivia was used to doing everything conscientiously, so she stayed up late with almost no time for rest. Olivia tried to talk to Susan, to explain how difficult it was for her to live under such a regime. Of course, it didn't yield any results. "You're just lazy," Susan sighed, "like most modern teenagers. But we, your parents, are responsible for your upbringing, and we're doing this for your own good." It was useless to approach her father. Susan had subtly influenced him, and he felt grateful to her for raising his daughter so well, instilling a love for work, keeping her under reasonable strictness. Her father sincerely believed that Susan was the one to thank for Olivia not hanging around in yards with other teenagers, not drinking beer on benches, not smoking. "You'll appreciate this later," he explained to his older daughter when she tried to talk about her dreams. "You, because of your age, simply don't understand what Susan is doing for you. She's preparing you for adult life." For adult life? Olivia wanted to cry from Obida then. She was no longer a little girl and knew what she wanted to become. A surgeon, preferably a cardiologist, to learn how to treat those whom others considered hopeless. But you couldn't just get into medical academy, it would be good to attend preparatory courses as well. Olivia talked to her parents, trying to convey to them how important these courses were to her. "But we're not doing very well with money right now." Susan shook her head. "And these courses of yours are expensive. We can't afford them. And anyway, maybe you won't need this. Today you want to be a doctor, tomorrow a ballerina. And we pay for these fluctuations when there's already not enough money." And this was the pure truth. Her father had problems at work. His salary decreased significantly, and it was often delayed. The family lived on previous savings. But money for Vicky's developmental activities was always found, and birthdays were celebrated, and dresses were bought, and sweets. Her parents saved on everything except their adored younger daughter, and it was difficult to forbid Vicky anything. At the slightest hint, there were tears, tantrums, scandals, disgusting scenes with snot smearing and stomping tiny feet. At such moments, her father called Vicky his princess and hugged her tightly. Susan also melted, and all the little princess's wishes were immediately fulfilled. Her parents couldn't bear to see her tears. They couldn't refuse her anything. She wasn't Olivia. When the older daughter tried to explain to her stepmother and father how she saw the situation, she ended up being blamed. "You don't understand that she's a child," her father said sternly. "A small child who doesn't understand financial problems yet. The little one should have a happy childhood." "This is all your spoiled nature plus innate selfishness," Susan said, pursing her lips and looking at Olivia. "You're an adult already, and you don't understand anything. And your pathological jealousy. No, we missed something in your upbringing somewhere." Every time Olivia tried to talk to her stepmother or father, she ended up being blamed, feeling misunderstood and rejected. Of course, no one paid for the medical academy preparatory courses. The girl's desire was considered a whim, and she was advised to study better. How could she study better? She already had straight A's, despite the excessive workload at home. By the way, Susan also considered Olivia's academic success her achievement, as it was she who had instilled in Olivia a love for work. It was her graduation year. Just a little more, and school would be behind her. Olivia still hoped to get into medical academy. They didn't pay for her courses, so she prepared herself. Fortunately, there was plenty of free literature online. Money was still tight in the family, but things seemed to be improving. Her father found a new job, though again involving long business trips. He had gone away for work shifts before, but now he was gone for 3 or 4 months. But the salary promised to be more than decent. Susan was happy about this. Vicky started school. Now Olivia had another duty, helping her sister with homework. It wasn't easy. Firstly, Vicky had grown up very capricious. At the slightest thing, she cried. The slightest difficulties caused hysterics. She cried, complained to her mother, who felt sorry for her, and asked Olivia to be gentler with the little one. How much gentler could she be? Secondly, Vicky, well, how to put it, had difficulty grasping academics, and she was also restless. In short, Olivia worked up a sweat before her sister's homework was finished, and only then did the girl start on her own assignments, again staying up late into the night, and in the morning at school she almost fell asleep during lessons. From Susan, Olivia still only saw reproaches and complaints. Despite the fact that the girl did so much for her stepmother, helped around the house, raised Vicky, there was no gratitude. She continued to perceive her stepdaughter as a hindrance, without whom everyone would be better off. And now Olivia had also grown up, become smarter, and began to understand a lot. This infuriated Susan even more. The stepmother didn't hide that she dreamed of the day when Olivia would embark on her own journey, leave the nest. She told her husband that life would improve and be completely different after their older daughter grew up. It turned out that even her father saw Olivia as some kind of annoying hindrance. Sometimes the girl shared her experiences with her classmate Irina. She was quiet and smart, even wise, despite her young age. A young girl, but with a soul that seemed old, having seen a lot. Your stepmother is a typical stepmother. Irina shook her head, listening to Olivia. But it's okay. Life is like that. It will put everything in its place, you'll see. You'll remember my words. And you yourself will stand firm, and everything will be wonderful for you with such a strong core. Her classmates' words were encouraging, instilled hope, and gave her strength to live. Olivia didn't give up on her dream. She wanted to be a surgeon and did everything possible for it. And she knew. After finishing school, she would submit her documents to the medical academy. The academy was in their city. Just 3 stops from home, she could walk. A tall, old building in the center. The girl often passed by it in the crowd of young men and women rushing to this temple of science for classes. This was her dream. And now the certificate was in her hands, red, of a special kind, and even a gold medal, a mark of distinction. Olivia was happy and very proud of herself. She didn't go to the graduation party. Susan said they didn't have that kind of money yet. But Olivia herself wasn't too eager to go to the restaurant and wasn't particularly upset. Well, Susan said in the evening on the day of the certificate presentation. Her father, as usual, was on a business trip. Now you are an adult, you're almost 18. We've raised you all these years, given you everything. Clothes, food, a roof over your head. The time has come for you to leave the parental nest. Where? Olivia didn't understand. Where do you mean? Susan said. To work, of course. What's studying? Leave these silly fantasies. Stop dreaming of the impossible. Medical academy? Do you know what the competition is like there? I found out. 12 people per place. You won't get in. Don't even dream about it. I prepared and I feel capable. That's just your overconfidence talking. You'll never get into a university like that. Something simpler is certainly within your reach. But think about it. That's another 5 years of studying, and you need to work. I need to study. Olivia looked at her medal. I'm good at it. School is one thing. Susan started to get angry but tried to hide it for now. But this is university. In school they gave you grades for effort. In university you'll have to study for real. There won't be time for anything. And you're already an adult. You have to support yourself. Especially since we're already short on money. Supporting an adult girl for several more years is an unbearable burden for us. I'll talk to your father about this. I've already talked to him, and he completely agrees with me. Olivia, you shouldn't waste years on studying. It's nonsense in our situation. Then people with those same diplomas stand at cash registers alongside those who didn't finish university. I know that for a fact. Susan herself worked as a cashier. She had an unfinished law college degree, and she often spoke with malicious glee about her colleagues with economics and law diplomas. You just don't know life yet, she lectured her stepdaughter. No universities, no courses, no buts. I've already arranged it. I have an acquaintance who is the chief accountant at a housing cooperative. They need a janitor. It's not bad for a start. The most important thing is that they provide housing for next to nothing from the reserve fund, so you can move out tomorrow and start your own life. And that's when Olivia got angry. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to speak to her stepmother like that. You have no right to decide my fate. I will be a surgeon. That's final. This is my dream, and you are no longer in charge of me. You've humiliated me my whole life. Do you think I don't see and don't understand anything? Olivia was truly worked up. She had never spoken to her parents like this. She hadn't dared. But here, all the grievances accumulated over the years seemed to burst out. The girl shouted about her feelings, about the injustice, and strangely enough, she felt lighter. She understood that after this, everything would change. You ungrateful wretch! Susan looked at her stepdaughter with undisguised hatred. Get out of here if you're so smart and independent. This is my home too, Olivia calmly reminded her. Mine and my father's. You have no right to kick me out, but I'll leave myself with pleasure. She began to pack her things. She didn't take much. Money, documents, clothes for the first time. It turned into a small, light backpack, just right. Olivia knew where to go, although she couldn't imagine what awaited her there. After all, she hadn't spoken to Aunt Ellen for so many years. But something told her she would be welcome in Ellen's home, greeted just like in childhood, supported, helped, comforted, given strength to fulfill her dream. She should have gone there long ago, instead of enduring the torment. She left the apartment without looking back. Susan didn't even turn around. Olivia had no doubt. Of course, she would tell her father and portray her as always, rude, ungrateful, almost a criminal. Her father would believe her. He believed every word his wife said. It was easier, more convenient for him that way. Well, it was time to admit that even her own father didn't understand or accept his daughter. He had made his choice. Nothing connected Olivia to this family anymore. Well, except for the shared inheritance, of course, but it was too early to think about that. The station. She bought a ticket to Aunt Ellen's city easily, without problems. The intercity bus was leaving in half an hour. Olivia considered this luck a good sign and smiled. Although she was trembling from the emotions and anxiety she had experienced, the girl was almost sure. Her story would end well, and now, right now, she was taking an important and right step. Aunt Ellen was surprised to see her niece on her doorstep, but she recognized her immediately, although they hadn't seen each other since Olivia was about 10 years old. They hugged. Finding herself in the embrace of a relative, the girl finally gave vent to her feelings. She burst into tears. Then they drank tea in the kitchen and talked. Olivia told her about her life. Aunt Ellen listened, shaking her head and sighing. Listen, she said when Olivia had finished speaking. You're staying here with me. There's a medical academy in our city, too. If you don't get in now, you'll prepare for a year, and then they'll definitely take you next year. I'd really like to, but Father, what if he doesn't allow it? You'll be 18 in a week. You can choose where to live yourself, Aunt Ellen reminded her. I won't let you go back there. I didn't think you were having such a hard time there. If I had known, I would have taken you through court long ago. Aunt Ellen told her how Susan had forbidden her from seeing Olivia, how she had turned her father against her. But that wasn't difficult. He's been under her thumb for a long time. She convinced him that I was a bad influence on you, that I was saying bad things about them. And I called you often and even came to visit. But they wouldn't let me in, wouldn't let me see you, and the gifts I bought you, they returned them. I followed your life on social media. Sometimes Susan posted photos where you appeared, sometimes your father. But I never found your page. I thought we could at least chat through messengers, but no. They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let you create social media accounts when you were a teenager. They said it took up too much time. And children shouldn't be on the internet. There are a lot of scammers there. And then, when you got older, you didn't want to yourself. Perhaps your parents were afraid that I would communicate with you, Aunt Ellen said thoughtfully. Hence the prohibitions. And why? Why did they always treat you so badly? Well, there's a reason, Aunt Ellen smiled mysteriously. You're an adult now. I'll tell you the story, and you'll understand everything. Clara and Ellen were cousins, more than sisters, best friends. They stayed over at each other's houses constantly, went to school together, hung out. As they grew up, they went to discos. Clara and Ellen had no secrets. They shared their deepest thoughts. Clara had a heart condition since childhood. She was often in the hospital. Ellen ran to her immediately after school, to her best friend. The doctors recognized her and always let her in, even outside visiting hours. The adults, watching the sisters' friendship, joked, "You'll fall in love with the same guy, and that will be the end of your friendship." The girls declared in unison that that would never happen, and it didn't. Ellen was the first to get married, to a guy from university, tall, handsome, smart, kind. Clara approved of the choice. You'll be happy with him. They were happy, but not for long. Ellen soon became a young widow. Her husband drowned while saving 2 teenagers at the city beach. He pushed the boys out, but he himself. Ellen was a very young mother then. Her son Andrew had just turned 2. Of course, Clara was by the side of the inconsolable Ellen during that difficult time. She even stayed at her sister's apartment for a while, looking after her, after little Andrew, trying to cheer her up, to distract her. Time passed, and Ellen slowly but surely began to recover. Life seemed to have settled down, become stable. Of course, she grieved for her husband, but finally remembered herself. Clara was happy for her sister, as she had been seriously worried about her condition for a long time. Then Clara also got married to Robert, a man a little older than her, serious, steady. He earned well, though he had to work hard, which Ellen respected. Clara's chosen one didn't exactly displease her. Ellen just didn't understand what could have attracted her sister to him. They seemed to be made of different stuff. Robert was not very talkative, even stern. He didn't understand their jokes. And Ellen considered this a serious drawback. You know, next to him I feel, Clara tried to explain, well, like behind a stone wall. And Ellen understood. Clara, her beloved sister, had been left without parents early. Perhaps she needed a reliable shoulder, and Robert was just such a person. Immediately after the wedding, Robert bought a large apartment in a prestigious area. It turned out he had savings, plus his work decided to help a valuable employee. Clara enthusiastically began furnishing the new home. They went shopping, chose curtains, chandeliers, and other important interior elements. It was exciting and pleasant. Soon, a child appeared in the young family. A girl, Olivia. Ellen's son, Andrew, was already old enough, almost a teenager. By the way, this wonderful little one might not have been born at all. Doctors advised Clara not to have a child. Her heart condition, it was unknown how her body would react. But Clara believed that a family without a child wasn't a family, and her husband, Robert, dreamed of heirs. So they decided. The pregnancy went perfectly, despite the doctor's fears. The girl was born healthy and strong. It seemed everything had turned out for the best, but not quite. A year after giving birth, Clara's condition began to worsen. The strain on her not-so-healthy body made itself known. But Clara regretted nothing. She followed the doctor's recommendations, underwent examinations, and took pills. She took care of her health and tried not to get nervous. The doctors say that with my condition, the main thing is positive emotions and no stress. Well, you have plenty of positive emotions, Ellen smiled, looking at her sweet niece. That's for sure. And no stress either. Everything is fine in our family. Ellen hoped that over time she would get to know Robert better, become friends with him. After all, he wasn't a stranger, the husband of her beloved sister. But he remained distant and silent. He would come home, find Ellen visiting, greet her curtly, and go into the bedroom. Does he not like me? Ellen asked Clara. No, not at all. He's just like that, and he's been working a lot lately. He's tired. He's rarely home. Constant delays, business trips. What can you do? It's a managerial position. But we and our daughter lack nothing, and otherwise he's good, kind, takes care of us, doesn't refuse us anything. But Ellen knew her sister well and saw that Clara was a little disingenuous. It seemed she was upset herself. Something was wrong. Another year and a half passed. Olivia had grown up and started going to kindergarten, and Clara was constantly in hospitals. She was home less often. She had to see doctors more frequently than ordinary people and carefully monitor her condition. Robert provided for the family, but spent very little time with his daughter and wife. He was constantly away on business trips, staying late at the office. And at home, he acted distant, which Clara explained away as her husband's fatigue, in her sister's eyes, or perhaps her own. But Ellen saw, understood, something wasn't right. She felt sorry for her sister. And one day Ellen saw her suspicions confirmed firsthand. Yes, Robert was indeed cheating on her. That day she received a call from the school. They said Andrew had a fever and they had sent him home. The worried mother asked her boss for time off. You never know, maybe her son needed help. It wasn't clear what condition he was in. That's why she was rushing through the station at that moment. It was a shorter way home. And she saw them, Robert and his companion. Beautiful, slender, tall, with a fashionable model-like appearance, as they said back then. They were coming out of the waiting room. He was carrying both suitcases, his and hers. And Robert was completely different from how Ellen was used to seeing him. Enthusiastic, eyes shining, mouth constantly moving, a smile on his face. He looked at his companion with some kind of adoration, and she seemed to allow herself to be admired. And Ellen stopped, watching the couple leave. A couple of times Robert put his arm around the young woman's waist, pulling her close to whisper something in her ear, and even kissed her once, passionately and quickly, because she almost immediately playfully pushed him away. In short, there was no doubt left. And this was despite the fact that Clara had said her husband was on another business trip. But the train that had recently arrived at the station was a direct route from Sochi. Apparently, Robert and the beauty hadn't gone on a business trip, but to a resort to relax. Ellen even stamped her foot in annoyance. After all, the doctors had advised Clara to breathe the sea air, but Robert had said he didn't have time, but going on vacation with his mistress, that was fine. Ellen thought for a long time whether to tell Clara. On the one hand, her husband was deceiving her, and Ellen herself would prefer to know such a thing, even if the truth was bitter. But Clara, she had a heart condition. Doctors recommended avoiding stress. Wouldn't the news be too much for her? In short, Ellen decided not to bother Clara, but instead to talk to Robert frankly. For this important conversation, the woman went to her sister's husband's workplace. Robert's office was located in the city center. Robert was surprised to see his wife's sister at the threshold of his office. Has something happened? He asked. Something has happened, Ellen replied grimly, and sat down opposite Robert without being invited, pulling her chair closer to the desk. And the woman told Robert what she had seen at the station, in detail, without omitting anything. Robert listened calmly, without even raising an eyebrow. And then, well, yes, I have a woman. We have real feelings for each other. We have to meet secretly. I'm not thrilled about it myself. But why? Why? Well, sometimes feelings fade. I thought Clara was the one, the only one. I was mistaken. Susan, With her, everything is different. Completely. I would have told my wife long ago, but she has a heart condition. Clara's condition is unstable now. The doctors say it's another crisis. When it passes, I'll confess everything. We'll get a divorce. I'll help her get settled. Don't worry. But telling her about Susan now is equivalent to sending her to the next world. You understand that, don't you? Ellen thought about it. Of course, Robert was right. 100% right. He was, of course, a cad and a traitor because of his affair with this Susan, but Clara, the mother of his child, he was, in his own way, of course, still protecting his wife from the severe stress that could have a detrimental effect on her condition. In short, they agreed with Robert to keep silent for now. It was indeed better for everyone involved in this story. For everyone except Susan herself, however, she only vaguely believed this. At one fine moment, Ellen still remembered that late evening, almost night, in detail. Andrew was sleeping in his room. He had to get up early for school. Ellen was also getting ready for bed, but couldn't tear herself away from her favorite TV series. And then the phone rang. Anxiety immediately gripped her heart. It was too late for a casual conversation. "How are you related to Clara Miller?" a strange male voice asked on the phone. "Her sister," Ellen replied, turning cold with horror. She still hoped that it wasn't that bad. "You need to come and pick up the child. Her husband is on a business trip and the daughter is too young to be left alone." "What about Clara?" "You need to come," the voice repeated, "and as soon as possible." Of course, Ellen called a taxi, and 15 minutes later was at her sister's apartment. There were too many people there. Doctors, police. They talked to Ellen, told her everything. She literally slid down the wall to the floor, sat right on the cold laminate, covering her face with her hands. Clara had had an attack. She died instantly, but the doctors didn't make it in time. Little, bewildered Olivia approached Ellen. Fear and incomprehension were in the girl's eyes. Looking at her, Ellen understood. She had to pull herself together. Her niece needed her. "Will you take the child?" the man in uniform asked. "Of course," Ellen nodded. "Of course, I'll take her." And Olivia did indeed spend almost a month with Ellen. Robert was sorting things out at work. He now had to look after his daughter. What business trips could there be? He was looking for a nanny. All this time Olivia lived with Ellen. Andrew helped his mother look after the little one and did it with great pleasure. And then Olivia's father took her, who, with his characteristic seriousness, promised to visit her. "Can I come and see her?" Ellen asked. "You must. I've made you a key to the apartment. Come whenever you want. Olivia is so drawn to you." "Good. And can I ask something?" "I think I even know what," Ellen nodded. "You want to know if I told Clara, about Susan? Do you suspect that's why the attack happened?" "Yes, of course I didn't tell her anything." Robert looked at Olivia with a direct, sincere gaze. "I would never, ever have done that. We talked about it, remember? I knew such a truth was dangerous for Clara." Ellen believed him. And then, several months after the tragedy, Ellen found something among her sister's belongings. Olivia was truly happy that day. She didn't leave her aunt's side for a moment. When Clara was visiting them, niece and aunt decided to play dress-up. It was fun. The 4-year-old adored dressing up and transforming, and Ellen admittedly did too. Both of them enjoyed the game, and they even put on music. Ellen opened her sister's wardrobe. Her heart tightened as usual at the sight of Clara's things, which she would never need again. They had chosen this blouse together, and Clara wore this skirt when they last went to the cinema, not knowing then, of course, that it was the last time. Ellen sighed and tried to reach for a hat on the top shelf. The hat caught on something. She reached out her hand, and a pile of things fell down, right onto Ellen. These were hats, scarves, and several photographs, neatly tied with a ribbon. Ellen bent down to pick up the pictures and was stunned. The photographs showed Robert and Susan hugging and kissing. One picture looked particularly romantic. Robert and Susan against the backdrop of a stunningly beautiful sea sunset, tanned, clearly in love. So that was it. Clara had found out after all. Perhaps that's why the attack happened. Ellen turned over one of the pictures. There was an inscription, apparently made with a lip pencil. "Let him go. He doesn't love you anymore. He's only with you because of your daughter. He won't leave because you're sick. So take the first step." Terrible text, hurtful words. Ellen imagined what it must have been like for her sister to suddenly receive this message and the note on the back of one of the pictures. She called Robert, who behaved very strangely. "Why are you doing this? I've already lost my wife. I haven't gotten over this grief yet. And now you're setting Susan up too. Why are you doing this? I understand you're upset that Clara is gone. Maybe that's why you don't want me to be happy either. That's why you staged this farce." "What are you talking about? Where would I get these photos? You don't understand anything. Your woman deliberately sent Clara to the next world. She's a terrible person. She did this." But Robert stuck to his story, and Ellen understood. Susan, this attractive, slender woman, had a huge influence on him, which is why he believed her. Insidious, cold, and deceitful. Ellen had no doubt. Susan had latched onto Robert only because of his apartment, his position, his decent income. She had a goal, and she achieved it. She destroyed her main rival. Maybe she didn't want her death, but the tragedy certainly worked in her favor. Before, they hadn't talked much, but now, not at all. Ellen saw Olivia often. Usually, she took the girl for the weekends. Robert still worked a lot. It seemed that now nothing prevented the widower and his mistress from being happy together, but for some reason, the man wasn't in a hurry to bring Susan home to his daughter. They met on neutral ground, lived together on vacation, but lived separately in everyday life. And only about 3 years after the tragedy did Robert propose to his mistress and bring her home to his daughter. Olivia was already in first grade then, and from the moment Susan became Robert's lawful wife, Ellen was gradually discouraged from visiting the house. By the way, Ellen had moved to another city by that time, bought a larger apartment there, and found a good job. She even thought about taking Olivia in completely because, well, why did Robert need her in his new family? She wanted to become her niece's guardian, which is why she improved her living conditions, so that there would be absolutely no obstacles. But unexpectedly, Robert stated that he would raise his daughter himself. This was strange. He had never shown any particular love or attachment to the girl, and he hadn't looked after her. He had simply hired a nanny when his wife died. They gradually cut off our communication. Ellen looked at her now adult niece. It wasn't difficult, given that I now lived in another city. Susan, she did everything to keep you away from me, because she knew perfectly well. I knew everything. I knew what she did to Clara. Well, and she was probably afraid that I would tell you everything, that I would somehow prove my point to Robert, and he would kick her out. In short, it's understandable. It was unpleasant for her to have someone like me nearby who knew all her secrets. So they pushed me away. And I tried. I tried to see you. But they were the parents, the legal guardians, and I essentially had no right to communicate with you. And I thought Susan appeared later, well, after Mom was gone. Maybe they delayed the wedding so that you would think that later, when you grew up. No, Susan was in your father's life before the tragedy, and most likely, she was the reason for what happened to your mother. I was scared to leave you with such a person, but what could I do? And I watched over you from afar. From the outside, everything looked fine. You wouldn't even think you were having such a hard time there. How could she? She didn't even spare a child. I'm not going back to them. Of course you're not. You're almost 18 now. You can decide where to live yourself. Tomorrow we'll go to the university together, find out what's needed for admission. Did you bring your documents? Yes, I only managed to pack a few things. That's nothing. We'll buy everything tomorrow. The main thing is the documents. Susan stood by the coffee machine, waiting for the bulky appliance to make hot chocolate. She was incredibly sleepy. Little Christina had been restless all night again, either having trouble breathing or her chest hurt. The illness of Susan's granddaughter, her most precious treasure, was progressing. The girl couldn't play with friends. She couldn't go to kindergarten. Her daughter, Vicky, She was clearly not ready for such difficulties as a sick child. She was stressed, capricious, and even angry at her daughter, who wasn't at fault at all. It was Vicky and her good-for-nothing boyfriend who, in a drunken stupor, made the baby. And then, during pregnancy, the young mother didn't restrain herself much. She smoked and indulged in beer. Susan tried to keep an eye on her daughter, but it was impossible to watch an adult 24 hours a day. People were right. They had indeed spoiled Vicky. And yet Susan just wanted her daughter to be happy. Numerous developmental classes, gifts, surprises, birthday parties. Susan invested all available resources in her child. Vicky had no household chores because her mother believed that her girl would have plenty of time to work in life later. Robert. He didn't interfere much in the upbringing of his younger daughter. He completely trusted his wife with this matter. And anyway, he was always away from home, earning money to support the family. Susan was completely convinced. You can't spoil with love. Childhood whims would pass with age, and her daughter would grow up to be a strong, self-respecting person. Only Vicky at some point stopped studying altogether because she was used to doing only what she wanted. She dropped out of school in 10th grade, declared that she would never go to university, not even to the commercial faculty where almost everyone is accepted if you just pay, because she was tired of studying and wanted to enjoy life to the fullest. She got involved with a bad crowd and often came home drunk in the early morning. Susan couldn't do anything with her unruly daughter. Neither could Robert. He didn't know how to behave with Vicky at all. He had never really been involved in her upbringing, although he loved her very much. He transferred money, bought gifts. And then the terrible thing happened. Robert was in a car accident on the highway when he was driving home from another business trip, and Susan was left alone. However, she was quick to act, and Robert's apartment and accounts went only to her and Vicky. Processing the property cost a lot of money and effort, but now it had paid off completely. As for Olivia, she had been living in another city for a long time, far away, a lost cause. Susan wasn't particularly interested in her fate. Neither was Robert. They only knew that Olivia had indeed gotten into medical school, as she had dreamed. No other information. Olivia didn't maintain contact with her parents. Probably she was in touch with her aunt, Ellen. Well, that was fine. Susan was perfectly satisfied with this. The main thing was that the apartment and money went only to them. And then Vicky got pregnant by one of her perpetually drunk admirers, and Christina was born, weak, pale. Even in the maternity hospital, she was found to have a serious heart defect, one with which children live at best up to 7 or 8 years if they don't have surgery. And Christina was already 5. Of course, Susan put all her efforts into her granddaughter's rehabilitation and treatment. She herself was surprised by the strength of the feelings she felt for the little one. She had once dreamed that money would provide them with a happy life without hardship, but it turned out differently. Everything went into Christina's rather expensive supportive treatment. The girl underwent several operations which only slightly improved the situation but didn't fundamentally solve the problem. It was scary to think what could happen to her granddaughter. Even Vicky, usually carefree, frivolous, and thinking only of herself, even she seemed to understand that the jokes were over and tried to take care of her daughter as much as possible. But the main part of the care still lay on Susan's shoulders. In their city, everyone refused further treatment for Christina. There were no such facilities or necessary specialists there. So Susan, Vicky, and Christina went to Moscow. They were advised to go to a children's surgery center where, it seemed, almost wizards worked, helping even in the most difficult cases. It was hard to get an appointment. The queue was long, but Susan still managed to get through. However, at the appointment, they were shocked. The queue was huge because people were coming from all over the country, and most patients had situations similar to Christina's, not tolerating delay. No one could be moved up, and by that time, the girl's condition could well worsen so much that no one would take her to the operating table anymore. They prescribed drug therapy for the little one for now, but no one could say if it would help. Susan drank her hot chocolate, leaning her back against the light hospital wall. Nearby, a bewildered Vicky sat on a couch, Christina sleeping on her lap, unaware of the seriousness of the situation. And Susan could barely hold back tears of helplessness and despair. She couldn't do anything more. And suddenly, "Oh, Miller dear," one orderly said to another, "everyone gave up on him. His heart was full of holes. Well, that's what the doctors say, hopeless. But she performed surgery at night in her free time, didn't leave the table for 5 hours, and saved the boy. He'll live now, and he'll become completely healthy." "Miller is a pediatric cardiac surgeon sent by God," the other orderly nodded in agreement. "And a good person, if only there were more people like her in the world." "Excuse me, where is Dr. Olivia Miller's office?" Susan rushed to the orderlies and asked them to lead her to this doctor's office. She was almost certain. No, it seemed too fantastic, but still. Olivia was finishing another report when a woman from the past suddenly appeared at the threshold of her office, the one who had once brought her so much pain, caused her so many problems. Susan. And next to her, holding a sleeping child in her arms, stood Vicky. Olivia recognized her sister too, although she had last seen her when she was still in elementary school. For some reason, she felt fear and also dislike, contempt, disgust, but also surprise, of course. And why? Why had the past found her at a time when her life had just settled down and improved? Susan began to speak. She cried, asked for forgiveness, and seemed to sincerely repent for her behavior back then. "What happened? Perhaps it's a boomerang, a punishment for what I did to you. But this child, a child who is not at fault for anything. You are our last hope, Olivia. Take her for surgery, otherwise she won't live to see her turn. You do this sometimes, I know. You take difficult children outside of work hours. I can't ask you this after everything, but I am asking. I have nowhere else to turn." Olivia looked at the little girl in her sister's arms. Her niece, it turned out. And with surprise, she suddenly realized that she no longer felt resentment, and the dislike for these two women had also vanished somewhere. Before Olivia were people, unhappy, frightened people who needed help, and a child, a seriously ill child. Olivia asked for Christina's documents. She needed to understand what they were dealing with. Susan readily pulled a thick folder from her bag. Test results, ultrasound findings, scans. Yes, the situation was indeed complicated and did not tolerate delay. But Olivia knew she could handle it. She had dealt with such cases before. True, she would, of course, have to sacrifice her free time again. But that was such a small price compared to a child's life that it was not worth talking about. Olivia had gone into medicine to save people. This was her calling, her dream. "Some tests will need to be redone," Olivia said. "And don't worry, everything will be fine.